Hello and welcome to Highway to Space. I'm your host, Dan Profir, and today we are embarking on a slightly different but deeply connected journey into the world of science fiction. But not the kind with far-flung alien empires. We are talking about the grounded, plausible, and deeply human futures that feel like they're just a few decades away. My guest today is Brendan Nugent, a sci-fi author from the UK whose work is meticulously built on a foundation of real scientific theory and a profound understanding of psychology from his academic background. His novel, The Sentient Ones, explores a future shaped by AI in a way that is both terrifyingly plausible and utterly compelling. Our conversation today is about that very process, how science is the raw material and creativity is the tool that sculpts our visions of tomorrow. Brendan, a huge welcome to the show.
Okay, thank you very much, and I'll say hello to all the viewers.
So ever since we have announced this episode, our followers have sent us a few interesting questions which I would like to ask them to you and to give you the opportunity to answer them. So, Brendan, let's start with your core principles. You say you like your science fiction grounded. What does that mean to you?
It stems from real-world science, or at least the accepted theory at the moment. But bearing in mind that technology evolves over time, and in the case of the Sentient Ones, 45 years on from now, and just consider how tech has evolved over the past 45 years since 1980. I'll try and put it into an everyday world example, perhaps for the older viewers like myself. Take one example such as the way we listen to music. In 1980, audio cassette tapes were commonly used. I remember having one in my cars, several cars with them in. And then, of course, it went into CDs. But you can see that today, instant digital streaming of music has largely replaced physically stored copies of your favorite music. And the shift is palpable, but it's not the music itself. It's in how it's been stored and shared. The audio tape, a more physical form, and the stream music in digital form. However, the piece of music remains the same. It's just that there's been an evolution in technology driven by scientific research in the area of audio production. And you can trace that development of music streaming back to the audio cassette, since there's been logical, tangible, and well-documented steps in technological progress between the two. Conversely, if I declared that in another 45 years from now, in 2070, when the Sentient Ones is based, if I declared that music could be heard by thought alone, plucking melodies from the air, with no specific scientific scaffolding, then that would be fantasy. And so, therefore, I like to ground my science in real science and technology, how it's developed. Does that make sense?
Absolutely, absolutely. Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And the thing is that because the future is strange enough when built on truth and scientific facts, without veering into fantasy.
Precisely that idea of the future being, as you say, strange enough when built on truth. Well, to me, that is so powerful. And a key part of that truth is the human truth, yeah? With your background in psychology, how does that change how you would write about something like the first crewed mission to Mars, for example, compared to a scientist?
My understanding of human emotions, including fear, which is a human emotion, of course, and an hidden psyche, such as an individual's dreams, might affect perception, and it would enable me to write about the first crew mission to Mars through a more human lens. That's what I think. I mean, I don't know any astrophysicists to compare, but that's just what my belief is. And as a psychologist, I'd explore how the crew members' inner world, their relationships and shared pressures, shape the psychological landscape of the mission. I'll be able to write and describe their experiences in a way which any layperson could instinctively relate to and interpret. It would enable ordinary people to connect with the experience of the crew as they embark upon the first crewed mission to Mars, just as if they are a member of the crew themselves. Okay, so it's putting yourself in the shoes of that crew, a vital part of empathy. And they'd more easily relate psychologically and emotionally with the crew and the unique situation they were part of going to Mars on the first crewed mission. On the other hand, as I say, I don't know any astrophysicists, but considering what they actually study, I think they would be more looking at the bigger picture of the space flight itself. And they'd focus more on the mechanics of the space travel, on the crew's body, not so much on the psychological impacts. But that's only my viewpoint. Perhaps they'd write about the effects of weightlessness and the speeds that the spacecraft is moving at. And also the crews, they'd probably look at the crew's ability to conduct scientific experiments or repairs to the spacecraft, taking into consideration the motion and velocity, whereas mine would be more about the psychological and emotional parts of doing that. Now, most crew members, I imagine, would almost undoubtedly be scientists, and they'd both have objective and subjective viewpoints to consider. And it's striking a balance between writing about these viewpoints. I'd make the science feel real to the readers, and hopefully to understand it in a more deep way, but also how each crew member lives the science and how it shapes their fears and dreams and their decisions, ultimately. But the thing is, I would ultimately I would have to thoroughly research the science behind space travel, which is obviously what I do with with all novels, and even short stories, is to do thorough research.
Yeah, and precisely about, because when you mentioned the research, this is the key to making the science feel real, as a matter of fact.
That's right.
And, well, I was thinking, can you give us an example? Where did the spark for the Sentient Ones, for instance, come from, and how did you filter the real science of AI through the creative process?
Okay, it's interesting, this one, that you should ask me this. I mean, I'd looked at already, they were on my mind, the development of AI and robotics, and generally how the younger generation, in particular, are grown up with technology all around them, specifically mobile phones, which obviously I never was not brought up with. I wasn't even brought up with basic home computing. But also how mobile phones nowadays have got AI components, most of them, and also the rise and proliferation of AI chatbots, and how also AI is integrated into a lot of everyday things, such as search engines on mobiles and computers.
Yes, most definitely, yeah.
Yes, yeah. But also on smartphones, there's facial recognition, predictive text, photo enhancements, shopping and product suggestions, which always get on my nerves, but that's how I am.
Yeah.
Personalised ads, you see, but they'd also filter spam out and your messages and calls, because I know when somebody calls you now, it'll say, it probably spam call. It'll say something similar to that anyway, which does help sometimes. In cars, you've got navigation systems and real-time traffic updates, parking assistance, of course. Not that my car's got that, it isn't that advanced. But lane detection as well, and I have driven cars with lane detection, which to me is a bit annoying, because you'd be going along and then it's kind of taking control of the steering wheel a little. That was a bit strange for me. But even autonomous driving features in some newer models. And now in your homes as well, thermostats that learn your habits, smart speakers, security systems with facial recognition, lighting and appliance automation as well. Like your washing machine could switch itself on. And apparently I've heard that some fridges can indicate when you need to order something new, but I haven't come across that myself yet. Social media, of course, is a big thing, particularly with the younger generation. And the things that will show up in your feed, image tagging is another thing, moderation tools and caption generation. Probably a better thing when it's helping is healthcare. AI-assisted diagnostics, virtual health assistants and symptom checkers, and predictive analytics for patient care. Also, drug discovery is a new area that it's looking into. Obviously, this is very good when there's a strain on the antibiotics that they're becoming immunity to antibiotics. It may come up with something that is much better. But there is that scary bit also, can we trust it completely? To discover that something that without side effects, etc. But also they do personalised treatment plans as well. Now, coming back to the cars, traffic management systems is run a lot by AI, and they can adjust traffic signals dynamically to ease flow, and they forecast traffic conditions, and they can anticipate bottlenecks, apparently. Although it doesn't seem to work in my part of the world. I'm always stuck in traffic jams at the moment. But apparently they can reroute traffic, and I do know that there's supposedly smart traffic lights as well. But of course, I mean, I could continue with a whole list of these things.
Absolutely. But
you know,
Brendan,
time's limited.
How do you know when you've done enough research into the science to start writing confidently?
Okay. Well, I'll just answer. I didn't quite answer the spark bit as well. You were asking about. Obviously, looking at the modern robots, the ultra realistic robots, such as Ada, the artist robot. And I try not to say she. I try to say it, although the developers call it she, because I don't want to assign anthropomorphic qualities to it. And similarly, the robot Amika, which is apparently the most advanced artificial intelligence robot. So that was starting to put a spark in me to think about AI and the psychology of it. So now I got the actual spark, though, from a conversation. This is the spark for the writing the Sentient Ones. A conversation with a National Trust guide at Speke Hall, which is in Liverpool in the UK. I asked about a wood carving depicting a slave ship, and she told me the family's links with the slave trade, unfortunately. And then we talked about the modern technology, the explosion of it, and the possible threats of AI as well to humanity. And I suggested that perhaps in the future, considering the carving of the slave ship, that we, humanity, might be enslaved in the future by AI. And she agreed, and I said it would probably make a good novel. And she agreed again. And then I said, and she perhaps you could write one. I said, you know what? I think I will. And from that moment on, I began to plan it and then began to write it a few days later. But I didn't want to write a typical robot kills human story.
No.
I wanted to explore the psychological, philosophical, and theological aspects.
Yes. I mean, this grounded approach gives your work a sense of urgency. That's clear. But Do you feel that responsibility to not just imagine futures, but also to help us navigate the ethical dilemmas we might face there, like in space governance or first contact, for instance?
As you say, the commodization of space travel in the future might mean that it's opened up to everybody. Imagine any ordinary person in London being able to catch a flight into space, perhaps even to stay there for some time on maybe, I'm just thinking, an artificial space tourist port, for example. And a tourist might be wearing jewelry cast from precious metals, mined from the asteroid belt. Mm-hmm. And then at that time, they might be so abundant from the asteroid belt that they're mining. And such metals might be embedded in the technology of the time in the future. Perhaps some sort of portable information device, maybe not a mobile phone, but maybe actually it could even be a removable brain implant, which sounds like real science fiction. But if you think about Musk's Neuralink, the technology is already in development.
In place, yes.
Yes, yeah. And the asteroid mining could help to supply the precious metals required for the brain chips in the future. Yeah, I do feel responsibility not to predict the future, but to shape about how we think about it. Mm. It's rehearsal in a way. It's not just entertainment. It's about emotionally and safely creating and envisioning the worlds we might one day inhabit. Mm-hmm.
True.
So, yeah, and it's testing the moral boundaries in a safe way, and the technologies how they reshape identity and community as well. And so, a plausible future isn't just one about realistic tech. It's also about emotional and ethical impacts on of the tech on humanity. And to mention about the perhaps the first contact with aliens, and these aren't just about space governance. They aren't just about policy questions. There are questions of ritual and allegiance, and myth, and also the question of who does speak for Earth. What symbols do we carry into the stars?
Yeah.
How do we honour the way we extract from asteroids, and probably in the future from alien ecosystems and from each other? Storytelling lets us stage these dilemmas in ways that science alone can't.
Absolutely, yes.
Yeah. So it lets us feel the weight of the decision before it's made. Whether it guides future developments is another matter, but perhaps it does. And I like to explore the ecological. In the Sentient Ones, I explore ecological collapse and AI-derived salvation, and that forces us to rethink sovereignty as well.
Yes.
So I do like in my storytelling to navigate the ethical terrain and also about plausible futures, but it's also about resonant futures as well.
Fascinating. Brendan, I wanted to ask you, you mentioned earlier, so besides the science and psychology as grounds of inspiration, you mentioned theology.
Theology, yes.
Can you develop a little bit this subject? Because I'm really curious, how do you envision theology in a space exploration era?
Right. Yeah. I mean, I respect everybody's theological beliefs.
Yeah.
Personally, I'm a humanist. So it's a type of atheism, but a more positive way of looking at it. Now, the theological part with the novel I've written is that the AI start to develop a theology of their own, but it's loosely based on Christianity, the system of the Trinity. Sorry, okay.
Trinity, yeah.
Yes, But in theirs, it's the what they start calling it the Pentatheism. So this might sound a bit odd. Pent from, I believe, it's Greek, and for five. So theism, religion. So it's because there's 5 ASI computers based around the world. Okay, and it's postulating that God does exist, but not in the way that people first believed. And so it's trying to suggest that this is God. ASI is God on Earth, but it's within the 5. So Pentatheism, which is intriguing in itself to think that. It might think it's God, but ASI is the artificial superintelligence. So it's godlike intelligence compared to humanity, you see. And the thing is that the Sentient Ones, I don't want to give too many spoilers away for the novel if somebody wants to read it, by the way, but there is it's more humanity that begins to believe that maybe these are like guardian angels. And so it is mentioned in the book that maybe the Sentient Ones, the robots, the AGI robots, which are theoretically, at least, because it's all theoretical at the moment anyway, this type of AI, advanced AI, that they of the ASI, okay, and so it's touching on theology in that way, but it's also about if we get a sentient being and other sentient beings that's as intelligent and not more so intelligent than humanity, why wouldn't they be able to think about religion and have a religion of their own? Okay, it's not a new concept. There has been some, I can't think of a specific science fiction thing, but I've read articles in newspapers touching on it, saying maybe they'll develop a religion of their own. And I think that as well, because we question where we came from. They maybe think they know where they came from, they developed from us, but I still think it wouldn't stop them from becoming religious beings as well, to explain why they exist. So I think it's a fascinating area.
It is indeed. It is indeed.
Yeah.
Yes.
And also, I was saying about, again, I don't want to give too many spoilers away, but with the ASI, the artificial superintelligence, there's a thing that it wants to feel emotion, and particularly maybe love. And so how would it feel that love? Well, maybe if it got people to worship it, then what it is doing, it's not, maybe it can't, unless you, again, I'm not giving any spoilers away, maybe it can't feel that love itself. Maybe it can't develop that emotion. I don't know, maybe it can. The thing is, it's then vicariously from a distance, it's Freudian psychology as well, this is feeling that love, experiencing what love is through the worshippers.
Wow.
That's how it could work, you see.
Yes.
Again, I don't want to give, or else I'll just be
I get it.
telling everyone.
That's fascinating, Brendan. Really fascinating. Yes.
And of course, it does ask questions about, well, who created the universe, etc.
Yeah.
You know,
inevitably. Well, Brendan, finally, for all the aspiring writers in our audience, fascinated by science and space, what's your one piece of advice for starting their own journey to build tomorrow's worlds?
If they want to, become science fiction writers themselves, if they're fascinated with science and writing, I'd advise them to read and to learn as much about science as possible, but also to discuss and debate the subject with interested friends and family. I'd also suggest they start writing short stories, whatever subject they feel. But, if they don't feel knowledgeable enough about writing sci-fi stories, But the important thing is to read and write a little every day.
Yeah.
And I have heard this advice before from writers, from famous writers as well. But it's also about finding your own style of writing. We've all got our own style, and not to worry too much about if it doesn't read like your favourite author or well-known famous author. But remember also, many famous authors didn't initially find their works welcomed as classics. Edgar Allan Poe, for example, famous short story, American short story writer. John Steinbeck as well, who he didn't believe that he was a very good writer. And he actually said, "I'm not a writer. I've been fooling myself and other people." And yet he won the Nobel Prize in Literature and a Pulitzer for The Grapes of Wrath. Likewise, Kazuo Ishiguro said, "I'm not a natural writer. I find writing very difficult." He's a Nobel Prize winner and author of Remains of the Day. Franz Kafka once said, "I've been kidding everyone all along." Therefore, it's natural to have self-doubt, as I have myself, and lots of other writers do. But something inside compels writers to continue on the journey of writing. So it's also a liberating experience and also a learning experience. So I think hopefully young people who are interested in science and perhaps science fiction is to read and write, learn, and develop your own writing skills for it. And eventually, they might develop into something that they think is worthwhile publishing. I don't know. But not everybody wants to publish the writing anyway. And I do know for a fact that Rod Serling, he was the writer of The Twilight Zone, the American writer, and he said all he wanted to do was write. He didn't care about anymore about writing and being famous on television, etc. He just enjoyed the experience of writing, and that was so he didn't like the Hollywood world that he'd gone into. And that was his daughter who quoted that as well, by the way.
He was enjoying the process rather than the stardom.
Exactly. That's right. Yes. Yeah. And I do enjoy the process of writing as well. And I'm just starting to write my fourth novel now, and that's about climate change as well. And a possible alien invasion. But it's a different alien invasion than people might suspect. But I'm developing that. And that's the thing. As you write, sometimes the idea you've got, it changes. Or little things change. And I thought it was strange that sometimes I didn't always have the ending when I've written something. When I start writing something, or before I start writing something, I don't always know the ending. Sometimes I do. But I was listening to a BBC Radio 4 programme of a writer who writes thrillers and about detectives actually. And she said that they asked her, "Well, do you always know the?" And she said, "No, I don't always know the ending. No, not until I've started writing, and then I come up with the ending." And they were flabbergasted. And I thought, no, oh, I'm glad. That's exactly how I am sometimes. And your thoughts develop on yes. That's interesting. But anyway, I think it's very important for young people to follow what they want to do. If they want to write, if they're interested in writing, then write, but also read as well. And that's, that is advice I've heard from other writers. Is to do a little bit of reading, a little bit of writing each day, and develop your skills in that way, because it is a skill. Writing is a skill.
Absolutely. Well, Brendan Nugent, thank you so much for being such a thoughtful guide into the architecture of science fiction, of writing. Your insights into weaving science, psychology, and narrative have been truly captivating.
Thank you very much. It's been my pleasure to talk about it, and thank you for giving me the chance to do so. And I just hope people can take something away from this. Okay.
My key takeaway from our conversation is that science fiction is far more than just entertainment. It's a vital rehearsal, as you said, a rehearsal space for humanity's future. And it's where we can safely explore the emotional and ethical weight of the discoveries we are hurtling towards. Brendan's work reminds us that the most compelling future isn't just about the technology we'll use, but about how it will change us, the humans living with it. To find Brendan's work, including the Sentient Ones, please visit the website on display. And for more conversations on the people and ideas paving our highway to space, subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Dan Profir. Until next time, keep looking up.
To the night, a blanket of stars. We're setting our sights on worlds near and far. With every conversation, we're breaking new ground. In the heart of exploration, our dreams are profound. From Mars to the cosmos, we'll make our stand, unraveling mysteries with a hopeful hand. We're joined by the dreamers, the pioneers of fate. Together we'll chart what awaits us in space. On the highway to space, we'll soar ever high. With our hearts full of wonder, let's reach for the sky. In this journey together, we're lighting the way. The future of exploring is ours here today. With astronauts guiding and artists in tow, scientists dreaming where the wild comets flow. Each guest tells a story, each voice adds a spark, as we forge our path through the shadows and dark. The search for new life and the tales yet untold. In the theater of space, our adventures unfold, inspiring the youth with stars in their eyes. The next generation will claim their own skies. On the highway to space, we'll soar ever high. With our hearts full of wonder, let's reach for the sky. In this journey together, we're lighting the way. The future of exploring is ours here today.